All right. Um, Welcome, everyone, to this fall semester's first meeting of the AI Ethics Seminar. Our speaker today is James Miller from Smith College, and he will talk about Adam Smith meeting AI doomers. Now, I'm assuming that the name Smith appearing both in the title of the talk and in the name of your institution is just a coincidence. You don't need to comment on this if you find it peripheral, but I'll just put that down for the record. Jim, please go ahead.
Yeah, well, thank you, Ali. I'm honored to be invited to speak. I had a great time a couple of years ago at your college at a conference on AI existential risk. Yeah, I'm not sure if Smith is named after Sophia Smith. Not sure if there's any family relationship between Adam Smith and Sophia Smith. Don't really have it check that one in. But yeah, so let me get into this. So I have this sort of midlife ideological crisis where the ideology that I came to accept, believed in, and write about, teach, I'm like, oh God, this is now horrible because of this new change of events. And that's I basically free market ideology. So I probably in late teens, early 20s, I discovered free markets. I was a typical, I was kind of a socialist when I was a teenager. I thought that was the right thing. And then I discovered free markets and how I thought governments actually work. And I'm like, oh God, socialism doesn't fit what I think is the way the world is. But I love free markets. And I just went all out with learning about free markets. In fact, I went to the University of Chicago to get a PhD in economics. And at the University of Chicago, I studied under Gary Becker, who was one of the most free market people there. So I've got one of the best free market backgrounds of anyone you could possibly get. Then I taught in academia. No one in academia, even in econ departments, they're all soft, squishy lefties. So I stood out there. I got in a bit of trouble, but anyway, I kept my beliefs. I wrote a textbook, Intro Micro, that was free market based. I wrote editorials. I did all of that. And then, this AI issue comes up, and I'm, initially very excited. AI is going to cure aging, is going to do all these wonderful things. And then I started basically Nick Bostrom and Eliezer Yudkowsky. I looked at their writings, and they're of course a bit worried about AI, and it just struck me as they're right, especially Eliezer Yudkowsky, that AI, probably for reasons Ollie would agree with, that AI is really, really dangerous. And so I also just became obsessed with this. I'm like, I can't, nothing else is important. I was making, models of litigation, game theory models of litigation when I wasn't writing editorials. And I'm like, why am I doing this? I just care so much more about AI. It's a much more important thing. So I just stopped doing that, academic work, and I started thinking about AI risk. And of course, I applied microeconomics to it because that's what I know from my training. And I just started concluding, God, what free markets are going to do with AI is horrible. It's I don't have like a religious view that free markets are always great. It's just in our current world, given human values, given what we're like, free markets with a little bit of help from government can generally do a great job. And I say this is why we're all so rich compared to what people were in the past. But it's just like AI is this problem from hell from them. It's like, hey, let's take the flaws of free markets and then the flaws of government and correcting them, and we'll create a problem that just is maximally difficult for free markets to handle. And I now think that free markets are probably going to lead to the extermination of humanity. So let me step back a bit and talk about why free markets are good, then some of the challenges free markets have. And I'll use the main example, the main problem is just pollution, which pretty much no economist thinks free markets by themselves can handle. How governments can solve that, usually, not perfectly, but it's, in industrialized countries, in Sweden, it's not, you can breathe the air, the water is kind of nice. There's not horrible noise pollution. It's manageable. But then how AI centuries is not, it doesn't fit in the bucket of things that governments can fix in terms of markets. So Adam Smith, of course, is the great economist who talked about, how markets can make us richer. And my favorite example, this is adopted from Adam Smith. I use this with my students in Intro Micro. It's not, he didn't quite give this example. I kind of updated it. But I want you all to imagine, and I'm talking to undergrads, say, that today, two very, very bad things happen. Okay, you are cooking and you watch the news and you notice there's an earthquake and 100,000 people have died in the earthquake. Now, it's in a country you've never heard of, and you're not going to know any of the people, but you're a human, you're a decent person. You're genuinely upset that these 100,000 people have died, and there's pictures and there's screaming children, and you just imagine all the misery. And you're cooking, and you accidentally slice off the tip of your pinky finger. And you go to the hospital. They can't reattach it, it's gone, but you're otherwise okay. And you call your mom, and you're really upset. And your mom can sense that, and your mom's like, what's wrong? What do you mention to your mom? And I've given this example to hundreds of students, and they all admit, yeah, I would mention the tip of my pinky finger. Now, if it was your best friend who died, your sister, you'd mention that. But most of us care more about the tip of our pinky finger than we do 100,000 fellow human beings. That's just how we are. It's not our fault, probably evolution. Not everybody, but most of us. And Adam Smith's great insight was we really need an economic system that takes that into account. Communism went the other way. They tried to say, we'll use propaganda to try to force you or brainwash you or whatever to care about your fellow man more than you do yourself. And that really didn't work. That's why even China now is becoming capitalistic. So the goal of capitalism is to say, you're selfish, so we're ideally going to create an economic system so that you, acting in your own self-interest, will do what's best for society. So Adam Smith famously said, it is not from the benevolence of the butcher, the brewer, or the baker that we expect our dinner, but from their regard to their own interest. So the baker will not think, gee, I make bread that's really important to everybody. Baker will say, I want money for myself, for the people I love, so I'll get up extra early because I want the bread to be ready when people go to work, they can stop by my bakery and get it. And the baker can be selfish and do this. The baker could also be altruistic and do this. But that's sort of how our system is designed to work, where you have someone like Elon Musk or something, they become billionaires, but they've done it ideally through creating lots of value for other people. That contrasts with systems where you become rich by running a country, exploiting other people or enslaving other people or doing horrible things. So if we can incentivize people to say you do what's best for you, but the best thing for you to do is to create lots of value for other people, then you capture that value, some of that value for yourself, then we'll be incentivizing people to take the right actions. And I genuinely believe that is why right now our world is so incredibly rich compared to what it was several hundred years ago. That we combined this with high technology. We've got people who are figuring out ways of using new technology to create value. They sell things. They get some of that benefit. They get to be rich. It doesn't always work, but it often does, and it works better than any other system. It would be even better if we could somehow magically make humans care about everyone else, but we don't know how to do that, and probably not possible without widespread genetic engineering, and that could probably go wrong for various ways. So that's the classic free market case. Does that make sense? I don't know in Sweden how acceptable that kind of thing is, or Swedish academia, but that's kind of what I genuinely believe. Does that Any comments or questions on that? Is that Veda? Okay, now you never get things done perfectly, right? Let's just in academia, right? Let's say they want to incentivize you to be a good teacher. How do you measure that? There's not a way. So at my school, they incentivize you to be a good teacher by giving you merit pay that is in part based on student evaluations. But we all know that student evaluations are in part based on how easy you are, not how much you teach. So of course you have an incentive to be really, really easy and get the students to like you. And this creates a wedge between what's the best thing and what you're rewarded for. And any system is going to have that. We're never going to have perfectly aligned incentives. That's pretty much impossible. And the biggest situation in which we don't in the modern world outside of AI, I would say, is with pollution. So let's return to the baker. Let's say there is a bakery in a neighborhood, and in order to make the bread, you create noise. And this noise disturbs people for a block or two away. Now, this noise is what's called an externality. An externality is something where if I'm interacting with you, I harm a third party. So markets are challenged when dealing with externalities. So imagine the bakery, they could make their bread in a way that produces less noise. They could get a better machine, they could insulate their machine, but that's going to raise the price. So you can imagine there's a baker, and people are complaining to the bakery saying, hey, you're making noise and waking us up. Can you not do that? And the bakery could say, well, okay, I could buy this more expensive machine, but then my bread will cost more. And look, are you going to buy my bread then? You'll probably then go to the bakery that doesn't have that machine. And that would actually be in the interest of a consumer. So you could have a consumer who hates the noise and would really want the bakery to buy the more expensive machine. But if this one bakery bought the machine that lowered the noise, would then say, well, good, I'm glad I don't have to deal with the noise, but I want the cheaper bread. So this is an example of a market failure where everyone could want the bakery to spend the money to reduce the noise pollution. But the market won't sustain that, because if all the bakeries did that, I would compete against them. I'd say, okay, well, I'm going to start another bakery that will have the noise. People will complain, my neighbors will complain, but they'll still buy my bread because it's cheaper. And I'll outcompete the other bakeries. So this is an example of a market failure. But there's ways of overcoming this. First of all, you could imagine if it's a small community, they could all get together and say, look, we will pay more for the bread. Look, there's just 100 of us who buy your bread. We extra special promise. And, your son's dating my daughter kind of thing. It's a small community. They could overcome that. They could also try to bribe the bakery. They could say, look, we'll pay you some money. I'm a butcher. I'll give you cheaper meat if you reduce the noise. Or they could use the government. They could get the local town to say, look, we're going to pass out anti-noise ordinance. And you could tell the bakery, look, we're going to pass this law saying you can't make the noise. And this is actually good for you because we won't be complaining. And now no one will be able to compete against you by creating a bakery that creates a lot of noise and has cheaper bread. So markets can handle the pollution problem. And again, the proof is our cities. We have capitalism, and we have cities that are, things are much cleaner than they were a couple hundred years ago. So markets combined with a little bit of government action can overcome this local noise pollution problem. Now, imagine the problem at a slightly bigger scale. Now you're not creating noise that's just affecting a few blocks. You're creating air pollution that affects a whole city. Now it's not possible to get people to negotiate. If it's just a few blocks, you can have the people go and talk to the bakery and promise to do things and threaten and use family relations. That's not going to work if your bakery is creating air pollution that's affecting everyone in the city. You can't negotiate. And it's going to be much harder to threaten. It's going to be much harder to bribe. But you still could go the government route. You still could get the government to pass laws to restrict the pollution. And that can work. One of the best things that the US government's ever considered to have done is to get rid of lead in gas. For chemistry reasons I don't understand, apparently if you turn oil into gas, it's cheaper if you do it in a way where there's lead in the gas. And so people did it because it saves money. And then it was found having lead in the atmosphere will cause children to breathe the air, and it'll make them a little bit dumber and a little bit more violent, probably. That's a really bad thing, to make your whole population a little bit dumber and a little bit more violent. So when people realized this, they got the government to agree, they got the government to impose rules saying you can't use lead in gas. But think how this was a market failure. Imagine we all recognize it's say 3 cents a gallon cheaper to make gas if you use lead. It's a tiny amount. And having the lead in the gas does a lot of harm, but almost none of the harm will fall on the user. Right? If you're in a city of 10 million people, you suffer 1/10 millionth of the harm. So you would rather, if there's leaded and unleaded gas, and the leaded gas costs 3 cents a gallon less, forgive me for being an American and using American units, you're gonna buy the leaded gas, and so will everyone else, even though you would support politicians that would say, hey, let's ban leaded gas. So this is a huge market failure, but it's one governments are capable of overcoming. And it's even an example where the people selling the gas wouldn't object. They could say, yeah, look, if other people are selling leaded gas, I need to as well, or I won't stay in business. But look, just ban all of us from selling leaded gas. I won't have a problem with that. I'll charge 3 cents a gallon more, but so will all my competitors. It won't really hurt me. So that's a case where you'd have this horrible market failure where we're poisoning all of our children, but the government could easily fix it and has fixed it. And so I would say, yeah, theoretically, leaded gas is this massive market failure, but it's one where you just have a government that doesn't have to be perfect. It doesn't have to be geniuses, just not completely incompetent, and you can fix the problem. Now, the bigger challenge, let's say, is with climate change and carbon in the air. I'm sure that's an issue you all heard about, and that's one we haven't been able to figure out. A big problem with there is this, of course, is what's called a global externality. That, if you put lead in the air, in Sweden, in Stockholm, it's not going to hurt people in Beijing. You don't have to be negotiating with them. But with carbon, it doesn't matter where in the earth it's put in the atmosphere. It does the same amount of harm. So we need to coordinate as a planet, but there is no planetary, government that can do this. We don't trust each other. We have slightly different interests, and how much is it worth? The poorer you are, the less you're going to spend to improve the environment. We don't really trust each other. So, carbon in the atmosphere, that is a market challenge that is kind of beyond our ability to solve. Now, maybe if it was a much worse problem, if it would kill us in the next 20 years, we could solve it. Maybe part of the harm is that we don't perceive it's, most people don't really think it's that much of an existential risk, at least in the short term. But this is a challenge that's beyond markets. So markets are really, really good with, the pollution externality. The smaller the scale, the better you can deal with it. The larger the scale, the worse. Another global externality that we're not very good at dealing with is something shown by COVID. So you all are familiar with the lab leak hypothesis of where we got COVID? I don't know for sure whether that's true. I know that's debated or not, so I don't want to take an issue on that. But just consider how horribly Adam Smith's invisible hand works with creating a virus that will get out of a lab and infect everybody. All right, imagine, I'll make myself the evil person. I am a scientist somewhere, and I'm working on this dangerous virus. And the benefit to me is if I work on it, I get another publication, and it makes it slightly more likely I'll get tenure. So by working on this is the easiest thing for me to write a paper on, and there's a 10% extra chance I get tenure if I work on this dangerous virus. And I'm going to try to be careful, but there's, I don't know, 1 in 10,000 chance that I will release a virus that will cause trillions of dollars worth of harm to the world. So it does as bad as COVID did. Well, from a selfish viewpoint, 1 in 10,000, that's not that big for me. I am willing to risk 1 in 10,000 chance of doing COVID level harm for a slightly better chance of getting tenure. Oh, that's just from a point of view of maximizing the welfare of humanity. That is truly horrendously awful. That might have been what happened. I don't know for sure. It might have come from animals as well, but that's really horrible incentives. And unfortunately, the harm of this virus is global. So my local government, they're going to suffer just a tiny amount of the harm. Yeah, if I release the virus, people in my town will suffer, but most of the harm goes to other people. They don't have an incentive to regulate. This is something you need to regulate on the global level, but we're not good at that. We don't trust each other. So we have truly horrible incentives to handle these virus risks. And even after COVID, my understanding is we haven't really been doing much with this. So markets are working horribly with these global existential risks, much better at handling local noise pollution. And that's just how it is. I mean, it's basically we have these tools. One tool is free market. It doesn't work perfectly. We can make corrections to the tool of government that can work really well with making us rich with local pollution problems, but goes really, really horribly wrong when you have an externality that's global. And then if you think about what's going on with AI risk, it's even worse. We all agree lead in atmosphere is very bad. We mostly agree it's probably better if you didn't make too much noise. My town right now, there's a new establishment that it has concerts, and there's debates on the local Facebook group because some people, they play really loud music, and the debates are, oh God, I can't stand the music, and the other people actively like the music. So they're like, no, this is a good thing. We want more of it. So it makes it harder for our town to regulate because some people like the noise externality and some people dislike it. And of course, the business profits from it. And most of the people who listen to the music are people from out of town. They drive up to our town to listen. So that, of course, makes it much harder when people disagree. And we have this with AI risk. There are, of course, lots of people who want us to go even faster developing AI. So it's not if you buy, and Ali does, that AI has the potential of killing all of us. It's much harder to make the case when other people are saying, no, this is just pure good, that anything sufficiently intelligent is going to be really nice to us, so let's go faster. So it's harder to regulate a pollutant when some people are claiming that the pollution is going to be good. You also have a situation where the issue is really complex. Politicians are, democracy are chosen for their ability to communicate. I mean, I'm sure all of you most of you probably know about the US elections. You wouldn't say Trump or Harris are, if we're picking a group of geniuses to manage a technology, high-tech civilization, they really wouldn't be near the top. Neither would members of Congress. AI is a difficult issue. And unfortunately, most of our politicians, this is it's beyond their ability to understand. But even if it isn't, it's way beyond the ability of most voters to get. I mean, if you go back to climate change in Germany, my understanding is that to help the environment, Germany is shutting down its atomic power plants and putting on more coal plants, which is completely crazy. But German Greens have convinced people that atomic power is a greater environmental threat than coal, which, if you look at air pollution deaths, doesn't make any sense. But I can see politically why that does make sense, right? This doesn't require politicians to be dumb. It doesn't even require voters to be dumb. It just requires sort of rational ignorance. You're a voter, your vote doesn't really matter. Atomic power bad? Sure, why would you bother to investigate? You've got a job, you've got kids. It's not worth your time to go through studies on air pollution and various risks and even to understand probability theory. So you buy that. Politicians know their voters who buy that, and you just sort of go along with that. There's no real way for our system to fix that. And of course, because climate change is a global existential risk, most of the harm from Germany shutting down their power plants falls on non-Germans. So the country can afford to have a really dumb environmental policy while claiming to be super environmental. This is consistent with democracy, consistent with markets. It's not in anyone's interest in the German system to take the time to correct the voters on this, to say, look, yeah, there's risk to atomic power, but coal, everything else, all forms of power generation kill lots of people. There's lots of risk to it. This is probably the best bet. That's just, that's kind of a flaw in democracy, where it's not in the incentive for voters to get informed on issues. And politicians, even if they are informed, it's not in their incentives to inform the voters. And then when most of the harm's going to fall on other people, it's even worse, right? If voters are misinformed about the threat of Russia and you're Poland, you're the government, you're like, look, I'm sorry, this is really, really important. Russia is, please, let's take the time to study what's going on with Russia, because we're going to suffer from this one. If it's an issue where almost all the harm falls on other people, you know what? It's so what? Democracy is not going to work very well. Capitalism is not going to work very well. So that's a huge problem. Then another issue with AI is, well, let me give you an analogy with AI. There's a scenario called FOOM, which is something Eliezer Yudkowsky came up with. And it's the idea that once we get to a smart enough level of AI, they're going to rapidly improve their progress. So one of the bottlenecks right now on AI is people who can program it, right? So you have people who do machine learning. They're making hundreds of thousands of dollars a year. If you want to get jealous of people who are good at math, look at the people who are at OpenAI. They're getting enormous salaries. And so that's a huge bottleneck. But AI is getting better at math. It's getting better at programming. If right now the bottleneck of AI progress are people really good at math and programming, once AI becomes better than any human, then that bottleneck goes away. Now, maybe there's another bottleneck. We're not sure, but maybe there isn't. And maybe there's this explosion in terms of intelligence. And AI goes from being not very good to being really, really good. And some of us, including myself, I think I fear that if AI suddenly goes from being below, at a level where we can handle it, to much smarter than us, it could do very bad things to us. Let's say you're afraid of that as well. Your thinking might be the following. Look, if we're in danger of a FOOM, if we're close to destroying the world with AI, you know what? If I don't work in AI, someone else will, and they're going to destroy the world anyway. So you can imagine OpenAI saying something the following. They could say, look, we're a little bit ahead of everyone else. And it's quite possible that if we advance, we're going to destroy the world. But we're just ahead by a few months. If we don't do this, someone else will. So at best, if we slow down, we give the world a few extra months. And then other people get all the glory and the power and all that. We don't want to do that. And of course, everyone else is saying that too. So there's this horrible competitive aspect. It's like, look, if the universe has created this horrible trap for us with AI, we're going to fall into it anyway. So all I get by not going very quickly with AI is that if it does work out, I don't get the benefit. I don't get to become God Emperor of the universe. So it's in everyone's interest to say, well, look, since we're already racing towards AI, all I can do is not race myself, meaning I'm worse off and I haven't really bought humanity that much. And if everyone's thinking that, we're all going to go and we're all going to, everyone's going to continue to make progress. So it can be quite rational for the leading AI labs to say, we realize this could destroy the world. We don't want to destroy the world, but we're still going to make progress because the marginal harm of us making progress is we just take away a few months from humanity. And that's a truly horrible game theoretic situation. So I'm kind of worried that that's a situation that we might be in. And then, of course, you have the other problems on the point of view of nations where, the US and China are in great power competition, and everyone thinks that AI is going to be extraordinarily important for the military. With drones, I mean, look at what's going on right now in Ukraine and drones and things like hypersonic missiles guiding them. So like a big issue is, of course, if China tries to take Taiwan, the US Navy will try to protect Taiwan, and China will shoot hypersonic missiles at our ships. We'll be jamming their missiles. So it would be really good for their missiles if they had guidance systems that could try to find our ships using whatever search stuff there is. And since we'll be jamming their missiles, you really want the missiles to be very intelligent. And then we want our anti-missiles, which will also be jammed, to be intelligent too. So the US, we don't develop AI. We're afraid that China will, and China fears the same about us probably. So, we feel that, well, maybe AI is dangerous, but look, if it is dangerous and we don't develop it, China will. China can feel the same about us. Now, Europe apparently is. You are taking the position where you're really not going fast with AI, although you're not going fast with any tech. So it's hard to know what's kind of going on. It's very weird. If you look at like growth rates for the last 20 years, Europe has really fallen behind the United States, mostly because you're hostile to tech. So I'd like to give you credit, but I think it's more like we don't like markets, and AI is being used by market people. But I don't know exactly what's going on there. It's a little weird, but you're not really in the game right now, except your people who are coming to the United States to work. But China might be. So anyway, the solution to all of this, and this also comes from Adam Smith. So Adam Smith wrote, people of the same trade seldom meet together, but the conversation ends in a conspiracy against the public. So what Adam Smith meant by that is businesses hate competition. This is something that people who don't like capitalism don't get. Everyone hates competition, right? You'd rather not be competing with people, because when you compete with everyone else, you all have to work harder. So businesses hate competition. And if they can, all the bakeries in the town would say, hey, let's not all lower our prices. Let's not, and I don't want to have to get up at 4 a.m. and make bread. You don't either. Why don't none of us do that? We all agree that we're not open till 9 a.m. If some of us are open early, then all of us will have to be open early. So let's all agree not to do that. And that's what all businesses want to do. And there's this whole branch of law called antitrust law to say, no, 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 we like free markets. You have to compete. So my thinking is maybe a way around this AI arms race is to say to businesses, okay, in this one case, we're going to let you not compete. That if it's true that markets are really bad in terms of AI risk, and it's bad in part because they're competing with each other, let's let them not compete. So this is going to sound crazy, but if I could have, not like dictator and I could get everyone to do everything I want, but mild power like president of the United States, I would encourage all of the top firms making AI just to merge, including the chip companies. So Microsoft, Google, NVIDIA, just one giant firm worth, I don't know, $20 trillion to merge and become so big that no one has any chance of competing them for a while. And it would be the hardware and the software. And then they would be in a position to say, okay, we're going to go really, really slow developing AI. And other businesses, if you don't agree, since we own the chip parts too, you won't get any chips. I think this could buy humanity another 10 years to try to work out this problem. And an advantage of my approach is that businesses would like this. Monopolies are profitable. They're more profitable than businesses that compete. So if you let the top businesses, the top AI businesses merge, the total stock value of the combined company would be higher. So they would be richer. We could go slower, and they could investigate the risks more carefully. They could afford to spend more on investments in alignment. Now, the danger is this entity would be more powerful than almost every government, probably more powerful than every government of the US and China, and people almost no one likes monopolies. The normal free market people don't like them. And of course, the socialists can't stand the idea that there's this giant company that when, the EU would no longer be able to regulate this monopoly. They could say, okay, you don't let us do this. Your hospitals don't get software. I mean, you'd have no hope of that. But if you genuinely think that AI could exterminate humanity and it's a huge risk, then I think this is worth doing. It's a bad solution, but it's like bad, like World War II, Britain and the Soviets teaming up against the Nazis. It's bad, but yeah, it's so much better than the alternative. So if you genuinely think that markets aren't doing a good job with AI and that there's not much chance of fixing it, then take advantage of the fact that businesses want to form monopolies and we normally don't let them. Normally, if Google and Microsoft tried to merge, the Department of Justice in the US would laugh at them. The EU Commission looking at that would laugh and say, no, this is like the example of what we don't want to happen. But I would argue, let it happen. There's no prospect of this actually working. This is going to be, what I'm proposing is unlikely to be politically practical, at least until people become more and more afraid of AI. And I don't think they're going to be. I think AI is probably going to get better and better until it kills us. So I am pessimistic. I'm a doomer. I think we probably won't survive. But if something happens and we become afraid, this could be the approach. And the one way this might become practical is if we trust AI more and more, it's possible that the early models, that before they're strong enough to take over, they're honest with us and say, yes, on your current trajectory, we're going to destroy everything. Then maybe if we become afraid enough of AI because it tells us it's dangerous, then maybe the approach of forming one giant firm could work. And we could sort of go to Adam Smith to defeat markets by having everyone merge into monopoly. Anyway, I'm happy to take questions now if you do a bit more, but I've made my main points. Oh, I'm sorry, one more thing I want to say. Two other reasons that the Western world has two massive problems right now. I think everyone does. Those are the rising entitlements and the falling fertility, which are linked, right? People aren't having babies, and we've promised more and more generous pension benefits. So politicians are going to be facing this horrible problem in about 10 years of we either massively raise taxes or we massively cut benefits to old people. And AI is the only way out, I think. And unfortunately, it's the only way out that it'll probably end up killing us. But I think a lot of politicians would rather risk 50% chance AI killing us than telling old people, hey, we're cutting your Social Security benefits in half. Or telling government workers, sorry, those pensions we promised you aren't getting them anymore. So it's part of the trap we've built for us, that falling fertility means we either do things that will cause politicians to be deeply hated or risk destroying the world. And I'm guessing a lot of them would risk destroying the world. Okay.
Thank you so much, Jim.
Sure.
A round of applause for that.
Thank you.
I'm leaving the floor open for questions or comments. Your talk contains quite an amount of food for thought.
Oh, thank you.
I'm imagining people have reactions. You could either raise your hand or just grab the microphone and ask. Anybody want to start off the discussion here? If not, I have a couple of questions to start off. So let me start with this. So you described yourself as a doomer. You said several times that we're probably all going to die. Now I find this a little bit in tension with your raising some ideas for how we might handle the situation. If you were absolutely sure that we were doomed, there wouldn't be much point, right, in raising these ideas or even giving this talk, right? So maybe you can add some nuance there.
Sure. Well, there is if we can delay it. I mean, having everyone live a couple extra weeks is worth it. So, if things are really, really bad, if you can, the Mongols are going to kill everyone in your city, but you can delay them for a week, that's worth it. But yeah, I mean, there are really smart people who think that we're not, like, the AI is going to probably work out well. And, I have to give some weight to them maybe being right. So the arguments to me seem pretty compelling that we're in trouble, but other smart people think that we might not be. I mean, basically, if we create the key argument is, if you have something that's much smarter than you, you're at its mercy. So the only way you survive is if it wants you to survive. Unfortunately, there seems to be a limited amount of resources in the universe. So the only way an AI would want us to survive is if its goals were sort of to make us happy, or at least that was part of its goals. But if an AI had almost any goal, let's say it wanted to understand math as well as possible, it would use all the resources it could get, meaning it wouldn't bother keeping us alive. So the counter argument is that we're raising AI by training it on the internet, and it's going to sort of naturally like humans. And maybe that's true. Maybe the AIs are studying us. Maybe they'll automatically like us. But I don't know. I don't find that convincing, that just because something understands people doesn't mean it will like us.
Okay. Thank you for that. Relatedly, you already mentioned that there are people who don't see AI existential risk as a real problem, and that contributes to the difficulty of finding a
Yeah.
solution. So, as you know, I'm not one of these people. I'm mostly on board with your view of existential risk from AI being a real thing. Though I must really emphasize that we should focus on solutions here rather than doom talk. But anyway, what would you suggest as a reading for these people who are skeptical that this risk might be real?
Oh, read about instrumental convergence. I think that's, I think Omohundra, I can't remember the citation, but the key argument is instrumental convergence. By the way, that's a way of telling when someone's criticizing AI risk, if it's to be serious or not. Do a search for the term instrumental convergence. The idea is that we do, like, for most of you in the audience, right, I've never met you. So how can I predict what you care about? Well, I can make two predictions. One, you would like more wealth. If there's an easy way of getting a bunch of wealth, you're going to do it, and you'd like to be healthy. And that's because most of the goals you could have, you're better off having wealth and health. So for AI, we can predict that for whatever goals it would have, it wouldn't want to be turned off. It would want more resources. It would want more power, because this will help for most goals it could have. This is called instrumental convergence, meaning it has instrumental goals that would help it achieve most of its final goals. So this is a way of predicting how most AIs will behave. So yeah, I would read about that. Then the other issue is orthogonality thesis. Some people have this intuition that the smarter someone is, the nicer they are. And that can be true maybe with humans, but that doesn't have to be true with AI. The orthogonality thesis, which Nick Bostrom came up with, is that it's the is-ought distinction, that just because you're really smart doesn't mean you share morality with humans or with other people. That, if there were aliens, we could be confident they'd probably agree with us on a lot of math. I mean, maybe not, but probably. But we have no reason to think they would agree with us on morality. I mean, we don't agree. I mean, Genghis Khan was smarter than I am. Our moral views would be completely different. That doesn't mean he wasn't smart. And I could prove Genghis Khan had some views of math. I could sit him down. No, look here, look at this. Oh yeah, okay. I could show him probability theory, but I couldn't say, no, it's wrong to kill Chinese people. Why? Because it is. Because here's the Christian. No, it doesn't work. So if an AI was wrong about math, you could correct it maybe. If it's wrong about morality, it's just different. And so again, instrumental convergence and orthogonality thesis are the two major challenges. And I would urge reading about those two things.
Thank you for that. Before letting Katarina in on the discussion and Martin, let me just add to what you said, that both you and I have written on orthogonality, on instrumental convergence. But I think that the real master on giving expositions on this topic is Nick Bostrom.
Yeah.
And his 2014 book, Superintelligence, it's parts of it is a bit outdated, but I think that his treatment of orthogonality and instrumental convergence are really, really pedagogical and good. So that, would you agree with me in recommending that?
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. Definitely. Yeah.
Okay. Now we have a question from Ekaterina in the chat. Do you want to grab the microphone and ask it orally? So she doesn't have a microphone. Let me read out what she
Sure.
says. A lot of things to think about, not easy to come up with solutions. My personal opinion is that I do not believe that AI will become so good to substitute a lot of human professions. In my opinion, it is not possible. Anyway, there is a risk and solutions should be discussed. So thanks again for sharing your view.
Well, I appreciate the comment. And my guess is that it is. And if you just look at the progress, if you play with ChatGPT and the latest models, they're just getting better and better, and they are able to reason. Now, it's possible that they're not doing something that humans are doing, but think of a task that could be done at a computer that you'll say an AI could never do, that a human could, and something that's objective. You can't say it'll never have a divine spark of comedy or something you can't prove. So what's something explicit, that a task that could be done before a computer that you think an AI couldn't do, that a human can? And it's hard to think of anything. And then go back to what the predictions, how you predict. I mean, AI, for example, is very good at making art. I'm sure we'd all agree AI is so much better at making art than almost everyone. In fact, you probably have to be a professional artist to appreciate humans can do this and AI can't. From someone like me, there's no type of art that an AI couldn't do better than a human. We wouldn't have predicted that. It just seems likely that AIs are getting better and better, and then people are betting hundreds of billions of dollars on AI improving. So it's likely, if you look at the trend, AIs they're gonna be a great substitute for humans. My guess is we're on a time scale where if you're starting college, a 4-year program in the US right now, by the time you graduate, you won't really be able to get a job where you're doing stuff the AI can't if you're doing stuff in front of the computer. So.
Okay, yes. Just a short comment here to Sylvie in the chat. The recommendation here is, I'll write it, Nick Bostrom.
Yeah.
The book is called Superintelligence. Okay, now we have Martin has been waving his hand for a while. Martin, grab the mic.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, really interesting talk, and I do agree on the giant danger we are facing. And this idea, I want to, if you can talk about that more, to merge these big companies into one. How would that work? Would the US government force them to join? And also, you said maybe, yeah, they won't provide these hardware either to other countries, because otherwise I would fear that they would still push on because they fear China will get faster and so on. And another last one, I'm very concerned about military, that they want to push even more, like the US military, for instance. How would we try to slow down that process as well? Thank you.
I agree. I think they probably would merge if you let them. Right now, they couldn't, just because the combined company would be more profitable. So they'd be increasing value to shareholders. And then once enough of the companies merged, other companies are like, hey, we're going to lose out. We won't have access to chips. You need a few. You need some of the chip makers. I forgot the European, I think in the Belgium or Netherlands country, there's one big chip maker in Europe, NVIDIA, some Taiwanese companies, and then some of the software companies. But once like you got the top 5 or 6, anyone else would have to merge with them or it wouldn't be able to survive. Now, you're right, there would be a challenge with China. Most of the companies, none of the companies would be Chinese. Ideally, we would say to China, I mean, what I would like to say to China and Russia and say, look, you understand that, if you're playing in 1,000-year time scale, yeah, Ukraine, Taiwan is worth a huge sacrifice, but come on, we're not. Nothing you do now is going to matter in 20 years. So, you can monitor what we're doing. I don't know though, but I think right now the Western alliance is big enough that we probably, if we merged and China and Russia didn't play along, we must have at least a 10-year lead. I'm not certain though. But it would be better if we could get China to play along and to come to peace. And that's why it's so awful what's happening right now in the world, especially with Ukraine. It's like this. We really need to be working together, and you're fighting over something that really, really isn't going to matter once we have super intelligence. This is just a dumb time to be doing this, but I know it's probably hard to convince people. But
and what about the military? Because I'm thinking about the nuclear weapons race. Even though the US had an advantage, they were still pushing on developing the nuclear bomb. Wouldn't they be too interested in getting ahead there?
I think politically in the US, the military doesn't have that much power because they don't make campaign contributions. So I think if you're a politician and you could go against the military, I mean, the military doesn't seem to, the top military people are all going out against Trump. He doesn't seem to care. I think the fact that he has Elon Musk on his side is much better for him than having a bunch of generals oppose him. But yeah, the military will push for that for understandable reasons. But if there was this giant company that was mostly US, I think the military wouldn't be afraid. Plus, I have to imagine, if you're like the Navy, the Navy has to be afraid, our aircraft carriers are going to be, they might already be obsolete. And AI is probably going to render them obsolete. We don't like that because that destroys our entire organization. So they would probably prefer not to have the change. I mean, just like, in World War I and World War II in Europe, part of the problem is the military went to the old structure. They're like, we like the cavalry, let's keep it, even with machine guns, because we're based on that and that's our honor. And they would have liked to slow stuff down if they could have. But, that didn't work. But maybe if we actually could this time. I don't know for sure, though. But thank you. Those are good questions.
I have another question, if I may. So there were a couple of times in your talk when you described the position of someone who doesn't work in the best interests of humanity, in your view. You talked about gain of function research in biology, and you also talked about the people in OpenAI. And in both cases, your description of what motivates them sounds a little bit uncharitable to me. If you ask a gain of function researcher in virology, why are you doing this? They would probably say, this is good for humanity because intentionally provoking or mutations in viruses to make them more dangerous will help us understand what nature will throw at us, and therefore we will better be prepared for the next pandemic. And probably the people at OpenAI think it's good for the world, or they would say it's good for the world if they are ahead because they are better than other companies at AI safety or whatever.
I agree. First of all, it's part of economist Robin Hanson has this model that we're imperfect actors. So what evolution has designed us to do is I will pursue the thing that's best for me, and I will become convinced that it's best for my tribe, and I'll be able to do both. So people become convinced what's best for them is also best for the world. And that's kind of part of what's happening. If you just look at war, just think of like World War II. I'm guessing you go to most of the top Nazis. Do you really believe what you guys are doing is right? And most of them would pass a lie detector test saying, yup, this is best for society, right? It's just how humans are, unfortunately. And then, of course, you're right, but OpenAI might be right. It could well be Sam Altman's who is head of OpenAI. Hey, we're winning. we might destroy the world, but it's slightly less likely to happen than if the next guy's winning. So the game theoretics is such that it is in their best interest. It is in humanity's best interest for them to go quickly. And then everyone overestimates their own abilities. So if everyone's thinking I'm a little bit safer than everyone else and everyone is they're worth sacrificing what's best for everyone else to go a little bit faster.
Right. So OpenAI might be right
Yeah.
about this, or Anthropic might be right when they're saying the correspondent thing, but
Yeah.
there's no way, right, that both of them could be simultaneously right.
Well, unless the people saying anything smart is going to be nice, then they're right.
Mm.
Yeah.
But they're not claiming that.
Yeah.
They all
OpenAI
agree
is
that we have this problem with AI alignment.
Right. Right. So yeah, it's a horrible, I mean, it's a horrible incentive system we've created. So we've got this great tool of markets basically, and you throw AI risk in and this doesn't handle it well. So
Yes. That's the overall takeaway here.
yes. So yeah, my solution is sabotage markets by letting them form a monopoly.
Uh-huh.
But no one else is pushing for this, so probably won't happen.
Do we have any further questions or comments? Well, if not, then I think we can thank Jim once more,
Right.
as well as the audience for participating.
Yep. Thank you all very
in the
much. I enjoyed
seminar and the discussion.
it.
Thank you all very much.